This is the Poco F4 GT disassembly. If you want to see more videos like this, make sure you subscribe and follow me on Twitter so you'll be notified when I upload a new video. And if you need any tools, there are links in the description. First, the sim tray needs to be removed. Here's a better look at that. Next, we need to apply heat to the back plate using a hairdryer or a heat gun to loosen up the adhesive underneath, and then we're going to use a plastic pry tool to pry the back plate off. The back plate is made of glass. Now the camera bezel needs to be pried off and removed. The glass camera lens cover can be removed by applying heat and prying it off. There are 17 Phillips screws that need to be removed. Now this metal plate needs to be removed, which is covering the connector for the flex cable which has the LED flash and the RGB lights around the cameras. And then the flex cable can be disconnected from the main board. Now the graphite film needs to be peeled off from the bottom speaker assembly, and then the top plastic cover can be lifted up and removed. There's a large area of graphite film which helps transfer heat. The NFC antenna is located on the top center, and there are numerous antenna lines which are these light gray color lines on the plastic cover. There's some copper tape on the other side. The battery cable can now be disconnected. Once the battery cable is disconnected, we can proceed to disconnect the rest of the cables. There is some more graphite film on the motherboard which needs to be peeled off and removed, and the graphite film helps to transfer heat. There are 4 coaxial cables on the motherboard which need to be disconnected by popping them off. This red coaxial cable leads to an antenna assembly on the side of the frame, and there's a plastic cover with a Phillips screw holding it down. Now the front-facing camera can be disconnected and removed. Here's a better look at the 20 megapixel front-facing camera. Now the motherboard can be lifted up and removed. On the main board, there's a 64 megapixel primary camera, an 8 megapixel ultra-wide lens, and a 2 megapixel macro lens. None of the cameras have OIS or optical image stabilization. The camera connectors can be disconnected by just popping them off. There's also some copper tape on the front shields. The SIM reader is located on the back, and there's more copper tape on the back shields as well as thermal paste. There's also an infrared or IR blaster on the top corner. Once the copper tape is peeled back, we can see more thermal paste on the RAM which is seated on top of the processor, as well as these chips. Here's a better look with the thermal paste removed. Now the bottom speaker assembly can be lifted up and removed. There are 2 speakers on the bottom, a larger one and a smaller one, and the large one has the small white foam balls. There are 3 flex cables and 2 coaxial cables that need to be disconnected from the bottom subboard. Now the subboard can be lifted up and removed. There's a red rubber gasket around the charger port, and the primary microphone is located underneath the shield. On the other side, there's some copper tape on the shields and some thermal paste. Once that subboard is removed, we can see the flex cable for the screen. So if you need to replace the screen, you need to remove the back plate, and then remove the screws on the bottom speaker assembly and remove that. Disconnect the flex cables and the coaxial cables and remove the subboard, giving you access to the screen cable. At that point, disconnect the screen cable from the extension flex cable, which connects to the main board. You'd heat up the front of the phone where the screen is to loosen up the adhesive underneath. Pry your old screen off, apply new adhesive, Reapply the new screen, making sure you run the flex cable back to the opening in the mid-frame, and reassemble the phone. Moving on, there's a large X-axis linear vibrator motor on the bottom corner. And this flex cable leads to one of the gaming keys on the side. There's a cover covering that and a Phillips screw which is holding that down. Moving on to the battery, there are pull tabs on either side of the battery to help you pry the battery off. Here's a better look at the dual cell battery, with each consisting of 2350 mAh. Once the battery adhesive pouch is peeled off, we have a better look at the dual vapor chambers. And this is the first time I've seen this. There's a larger one over here which runs underneath the battery and the motherboard, and there's a copper plate over here. And a smaller one on the bottom which runs underneath the lower portion of the battery, as well as the subboard. And there's thermal paste over here as well. We can also see this flex cable, which is an extension cable that connects the main board to the connector over here for the screen. This flex cable over here is for the power button on the side, and there's a red rubber gasket covering the opening. So if you need to replace that, you'd have to remove this red rubber gasket and peel off the flex cable. The flex cable for the volume keys is routed through an opening in the mid frame, so if you needed to replace that, you'd have to actually pry the screen off as well. This is the flex cable for the other gaming key, and there's a Phillips screw holding that down. And there are two more speakers on top, a larger one and a small one. Both are held down with some adhesive, and the larger one has the little white foam balls. And here are the flex cables for them. Next to those is the proximity sensor board, and there are two liquid damage indicator stickers on the frame. For the repairability score, I give this phone a 5.5 out of 10. Now it's time to put the phone back together. Once everything's back in place, apply new adhesive and reapply the back plate. Flip over the phone, power it on, and you're done. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.